Would you rather live your life based on how others wanted you to live it and gain all that social acceptance that you want as a result? Or would you rather be truly authentic but lose out on all that social validation? As much as we may like to say that we're true to ourselves or down to earth, the fact of the matter is that many social forces influence who we are. Whether it be in a crowd, on social media, or your boss, or the person you're going on a date with, we admittedly restrain at least a portion of ourselves to fit into an environment. The forgotten philosopher we're going to talk about today advocates for a kind of individualist ethics that praises authenticity even in the face of social pressure, and that philosopher is Han Reiner. Reiner was born as Jacques Elie Heinrich Ambroise Ness, which he thankfully substituted for the pseudonym Han Reiner, probably because he knew that French name would be unpronounceable. He was born on December 7th, 1861 in Algeria, at that time French Algeria. It seems like a lot of his early life was made up of a lot of diverse writing. He wrote novels, articles, essays. He was just all over the place. In 1903, he wrote his mini manual of individualism, which we'll be looking at in this video. Now during this time, he was buddy-buddy with many anarchists, like Emile Janvion and Maria de Mora. And although I don't know much about their work, as we'll see later on, Reiner is not exactly your typical anarchist, and I'd argue he maybe shouldn't be viewed as one. During World War I, he did a lot of anti-war advocacy, as well as advocating for the release of certain prisoners until his death in Paris in 1938. Now, as we get into his actual philosophy, I want you to keep in mind this advocacy portion of his life, as well as his anarchist label, and see if you notice any discrepancies. So again, the text we're looking at is the Mini Manual of Individualism, and right from the first page you'll notice something unique. Instead of paragraphs, Reiner decides to use a question and answer format to explain his philosophy. It's not so much a question and answer between an imaginary student or teacher, but one person, an individualist, questioning himself. Thankfully, Reiner lays out what he means by individualism early on in this manual. What do I mean by individualism? I mean by individualism the moral doctrine which, relying on no dogma, no tradition, no external determination, appeals only to the individual conscience. So we have this moral doctrine which is not informed by the theories that others come up with, nor is it informed by tradition or the external, but rather, this moral doctrine is formed solely by individual conscience. If my moral conscience determines something to be right, then that thing is right for me. Don't get this confused with egoism, which advocates for you acting in your self-interest. Your individual moral conscience could tell you to act against your self-interest, for the sake of others. So it's not an egoist philosophy that Reiner is espousing. Now that we know what determines right and wrong, what does it take to then follow Reiner's philosophy in practice? What must I do to truly deserve the name of individualist? All my acts must be in agreement with my ideas. Is that agreement not difficult to obtain? It is less difficult than it seems. Now, I could be wrong, but I do think it's pretty difficult for our acts to be in agreement with our ideas. As explained in the intro, there are many social circumstances that easily override our true authenticity. But what do you think? Are you with Reiner and think it's easier than it seems? So another important point of Reiner's philosophy is his love of Epicureanism and Stoicism. He mixes Epicureanism, Stoicism, and his individuality to come up with a smoothie of different ideas. What is the right way to prepare oneself for perfection? It is right to go to Epictetus by passing through Epicurus. I want to focus specifically on his interest in Stoicism, because it also informs how he thinks one might want to act. And this is where the discrepancies between his life and his philosophy start to show up. He reaffirms the Stoic idea that there are things that don't depend on us, that we should be indifferent to. These things are external things, the world, the body, wealth, reputation, things that are not internal to us. With this in mind, in chapter 4 of his manual, he goes over society, something that would fall under the things outside our control, in the external. This is how Reiner explains how an individualist should act when he encounters problems in the world. What should the imperfect individualist do in the face of social constraints? He should defend his reason and his will against them. He will reject the prejudices it imposes on other men, and he will forbid himself from hating or loving it. He will progressively free himself from any fear or desire concerning it. He will advance towards perfect indifference, which is what wisdom is when confronting things that do not depend on him. So Reiner wants us to free ourselves from our emotional attachment regarding these social problems in the world. Let's say there's a policy you don't agree with getting passed, or a candidate that gets elected that you don't like. To Reiner, the happening of this event is out of your control, so it's happening regardless. However, your emotional reaction to that incident is in your control. Therefore, achieve indifference to these societal happenings to free yourself. In today's world, we see a lot of political activism and tribalism and polarization. A lot of people get big mad and big sad and big happy about things that do not depend on them. And because we like to fixate on problems, we're probably more mad and sad than we are happy when it comes to politics. So what are the practical results from our emotional involvement? To Reiner, there is no external consequence. Our anger or sadness is not going to definitively change anything. The only practical result of our political involvement is our negative emotions. Example, whenever there's an election and a candidate loses, the supporters of the losing candidate, for some unbeknownst reason, feel an urge to make public their outrage. This outrage doesn't make that elected candidate resign. It's just a self-inflicted emotional wound with no practical external consequence, a screaming into the void. Now you might say, okay Reiner, but don't you care about the oppressed, the marginalized, those who suffer? Just because we can't definitively make any external changes in the world, should we just not care? Is the wise man not selfish in forgetting the happiness of the people? The wise man knows that the words, the happiness of the people, have no meaning. Happiness is internal and individual. It could only be produced within oneself. We also see a lot of this today. People say, I'm fighting for this group. I'm fighting for this monolithic idea of generalized people that I don't even know. But really, the idea of the people or the whatever group is just a lazy way of generalizing the different desires, personalities, and dreams of billions of individuals across the globe. Now with this apoliticism in mind, I want to lightning round a couple more quotes that cover oppression, revolutions, and yes, even anarchism. Does the wise man then have no pity for the oppressed? The wise man knows that the oppressed who complain aspire to be oppressors. He relieves them according to his means, but he doesn't believe in salvation through common action. Is the wise man revolutionary? Experience proves to the wise man that revolutions never have lasting results. Reason tells him that lies are not refuted by lies, and that violence isn't destroyed by violence. What does the wise man think of anarchy? The wise man regards anarchy as a form of naivete. So with all this said, is it really fair to label him as an individualist anarchist, or rather simply an individualist? I kinda lean towards the latter, but let me know if you disagree. Now all this talk of apoliticism may rub you the wrong way. After all, we're in what I'd call a hyper-politicized time, where apoliticism is seen as the enemy to different factions. If you're not with us, you're against us, that sort of thing. But me and Reiner seem to both agree that apoliticism doesn't equate to a total rejection of the troubles others face, but rather a focus on individual struggles as opposed to societal struggles. So the wise man will never act on society? The wise man knows that we can't destroy either social injustice or the waters of the sea, but he strives to save an oppressed person from a particular injustice, just as he throws himself into the water to save a drowning man. This might be, personally, one of the most agreeable quotes I've ever read on this channel, for me at least. I've known a lot of people in my life. I've known a lot of politically addicted people, and many times these politically addicted people have acted in immoral ways towards other individuals. Not all the time, and I'm not generalizing, but I'm just trying to say that one's moral character is not measured by their political involvement. And oftentimes, one's political involvement is used as an excuse to not act ethically towards another individual. Example, I knew a guy very politically addicted, but he refused to tip waiters and waitresses. His excuse was, well, the employer should be paying these people more, or policymakers should demand it. Regardless of whether he's right or not, what does his action practically result in? The employer doesn't care, the policymaker doesn't care, the only one hurt is the server, the individual, who is now without a tip, extra money to help pay the bills. And it's these individual experiences that we have more practical control over. What's more likely, that you change our entire system of government or economic structure, or that you could buy a homeless person a meal or make a donation to charity? I know a lot of people disagree with me and Reiner on this, but it's just something to think about. And as a true individualist, he does not mandate his philosophy to people. He wants you to find a moral code that works best for you. He's simply just making a suggestion. Is individualism fitting for all men? There are men who are invincibly repelled by the seeming harshness of individualism. These should choose another moral method. Anyway, before I get any more hate, I'm gonna end the video here. Let me know what you think of Reiner and his individualist philosophy. Thank you to the commenters who kept pushing for this guy to get covered, by the way. He got a lot of requests. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.